ain't got no respect. What's up, bro? What's up? Hell no.
The screen flickers with real-time footage. He is engaging his followers online, unaware that his last moments are about to unfold in front of the world. This was Kevin Watson, a 42-year-old father from Chicago, simply sitting in his car, streaming on Facebook Live with millions of people watching. Then, in an instant, a vehicle pulls up, an unidentified man steps into view, a gun is drawn, and violence erupts right before people's eyes. Within seconds, Kevin is struck in the chest and collapses, the live stream capturing every horrifying moment. His final breath, his final moments, had been turned into a shockwave of fear and disbelief. The tragedy played out in broad daylight, in a mundane South Austin parking lot. A father, a neighbor, a man with a 6-year-old son, all gone in an instant. His death became a stark reminder. Violence can reach us entirely unfiltered, even through our screens. But Kevin was more than a viral live stream. He was beloved, described by family as the liveliest person. In the next minutes, we'll introduce who he was, retrace that fateful evening, and explore the ripples of grief that followed. Stay with us, because this is not just another crime story. This is the story of a man killed in real time, leaving behind loved ones who watched in horror, and a community struggling to make sense of such senselessness. As Kevin spoke into his phone, a car pulled up beside him. A stranger stepped into view. The mood shifted instantly. The live stream that had started with light conversation suddenly carried the weight of fear. Kevin's words grew tense, his voice sharpened, and then a flash of movement. Gunshots. The sound pierced through the live stream, echoing across phones and laptops in real time. Thousands of people who thought they were just tuning into a friend's post suddenly became helpless witnesses to a man's final moments. Kevin clutched his chest, struggling for air. He stumbled, collapsed, and the camera kept rolling. His life, his humanity, draining away in front of people who could do nothing but watch. His cousin, his friends, even strangers across the internet screamed through their screens, desperate for him to hold on. In that instant, Kevin became more than a man. He became a painful symbol of violence in America, a face on a live stream that forced the world to confront a horrifying reality, that death can now arrive in real time, broadcast live, unfiltered, unforgettable. But Kevin's story is not just about how he died. It's about who he was, the community he lifted, the son he adored, and the family he left behind. This isn't just another viral tragedy. This is the story of a father, a friend, a man whose life mattered. And tonight we tell his story beyond the live stream. Tonight, we remember Kevin Watson, not as a statistic or a headline, but as a father, a friend, and a human being whose life mattered deeply. Let's honor him by understanding what happened and why it matters. Don't forget to hit that like button. Share and comment on what this means to you. Subscribe to this channel to save someone you love, because we share contents that save lives. Before his name appeared in headlines, Kevin Watson was simply known as a father. At 42 years old, his greatest pride and joy was his young son, a boy who looked up to him with trust and love. No matter what obstacles life threw his way, Kevin's motivation always circled back to that little boy. He was a reason Kevin kept going, the reason he worked hard to make something better of himself. He grew up on the south side of Chicago, a place both tough and resilient, just like him. It was a neighborhood that demanded strength but also fostered deep bonds between those who lived there. People who knew Kevin describe a man who had weathered storms but never lost his warmth. He carried himself with a quiet strength, the kind you only gain after surviving challenges and still choosing to care for others. Kevin had dreams that went beyond just getting by. In conversations with friends and family, he talked about building a life of stability, stepping away from struggles of the past, and focusing on what mattered most, providing a safe, loving future for his son. His hopes were simple yet powerful. He wanted to be present, to be steady, to be the kind of father his child could always depend on. To his friends, Kevin was the type of man you could lean on. If you needed a ride, he'd show up. If you needed encouragement, he'd find the words. A cousin later said he had a big heart, and it's a sentiment echoed by many who crossed paths with him. Even when life wasn't easy for him, Kevin still found a way to lift others up. He may not have been wealthy or famous, but in his community, Kevin mattered. He mattered to neighbors who saw his familiar face each day, to his friends who could always call on him, and most of all to his son, who adored him without question. In a world that sometimes overlooks people like Kevin, his presence made a difference in ways that truly counted. Those closest to him describe a man who balanced caution with a desire to live freely. He understood the dangers of the city, but he didn't want to let fear define his life. He laughed, he shared stories, and he embraced small joys, including his moments online, where he streamed and connected with people in real time. And that is what he was doing on the night everything changed. Kevin wasn't seeking conflict, nor was he stirring up trouble. He was simply live streaming, engaging with his circle, showing the world a glimpse of his everyday life. What he didn't know was that danger was already closing in, and that this simple act of connection would become the backdrop to an unthinkable tragedy. Kevin Watson should be remembered not just for the way his life ended, but for the way he lived. He was a father, a friend, and a man who loved deeply. His story deserves to be told with dignity, because behind the headlines was a human being who mattered, whose dreams and love were cut short far too soon. On the evening of that fateful day, Kevin Watson was doing something ordinary, something so many of us take for granted. He was live on Facebook, his phone balanced in his hand, as he shared pieces of his life with those who tuned in. The comments scrolled, the voices of friends and family chiming in, laughing, engaging. It was simple, casual, human, a moment where he connected with his community in real time. The live stream captured a man in his element. Kevin wasn't posturing or pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was relaxed, his tone familiar, his energy steady. To his viewers, it was just another night in Kevin's world. They couldn't have imagined that what began as an ordinary broadcast would soon spiral into something horrific. Then, in the middle of the stream, shadows of danger entered the frame. Not visibly at first, but in the shift of sound, the tension that suddenly snapped into place. The calm chatter was interrupted by sharp cracks, the unmistakable sound of gunfire. In an instant, Kevin's life shifted from the everyday to the unimaginable. Viewers watching online froze, horrified, as the live stream continued to capture the chaos. Kevin had been struck. His phone slipped, the camera shaking, capturing a scene no one ever expected to witness. The comments that once filled with laughter turned into panic cries of, "Are you okay? What's happening?" The horror played out before the eyes of his virtual community in real time.
Y'all don't care. Y'all had issues with Tug too. Can die. Y'all sat there and watched that. I watched the gun in his hand.
Kevin Watson's murder has already been viewed nearly 2 million times on Facebook as he was killed in the middle of his Facebook Live. In that video, you can see him getting out of his car before hearing a single gunshot fired, happening mere blocks away from this police station here in South Austin.
Get into it with y'all because y'all ain't got no respect. What's up, bro? What's up?
Kevin Watson's final moments captured on Facebook Live as gunfire rang out in this parking lot Wednesday evening on Madison near LeClaire Avenue in Chicago's South Austin neighborhood.
He was choking for breath. He was trying to struggle to breathe.
All of it unfolding right after Watson left his cousin's job at this nearby liquor store to begin his Facebook Live in his car.
I wouldn't let him walk out the store. He was a good man for this community. No matter what he done, he helped people, you know? He helped me get this job in there.
Close friends turned heartbroken witnesses say as Watson was walking to his car.
He was talking to a guy, and he was going to his car, and then the guy followed behind him. So when the guy followed behind him, pulled a gun on him. So he was trying to wrestle with the gun, and the gun went off.
Police say the 40-year-old was shot in his chest.
I rubbed his palm, and I squeezed his hand. He wouldn't squeeze back.
Relatives tell us he leaves behind a 6-year-old son and say Watson was killed just weeks shy of his own birthday.
We're going to have to figure out how to move on and be strong day to day and help each other get past this, because this didn't just hurt one person, this hurt a lot of us.
Police haven't given a motive behind the shooting. So far, no one has been arrested.
I've also seen videos of shit. So whoever the nigga was that got out on my brother, they was already sitting there for like 10, 15 minutes. Since when do a motherfucker pull up there and sit for 10 minutes with tinted windows and don't nobody wash their car? Since when? Motherfucker pull up with tinted windows and don't nobody wash the car. Since when? Anytime a motherfucker ever been somewhere and you know it's shit going on, a motherfucker like, wash that car. It was so many of you bitch ass niggas out there on that camera. None of you niggas said, wash that car. You niggas knew what was gonna happen. And y'all waited. Y'all waited. I watched the video. I don't need no more motherfucking proof. You niggas waited. Didn't no motherfucker care to help. Nobody cared to help. You niggas watch that motherfucking car sit there for 10 motherfucking minutes. Listen, man. Motherfuckers wonder why I be feeling the way I be feeling. You hoe-ass niggas.
At just 42 years old, Kevin Watson's life was cut short in the most public and chilling of ways. The very tool he had been using to connect with the world became a window into his final moments. For his family, for his son, for his friends who loved him, the knowledge that his last breaths were broadcast for strangers to see only added to the grief. News spread quickly across Chicago and beyond. What began as whispers, "Did you see the video?" soon became headlines. A father, a man known for his big heart, gunned down while live streaming. It was both deeply personal and horrifyingly public, a loss that left people shaken long after cameras stopped rolling. For his family, the final hours were almost unbearable to process. His brother was really heartbroken, and everyone online saw the pain of the loss in his eyes. Kevin had not been looking for trouble, had not been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was simply living his life, present in a moment that should have been uneventful. And yet, violence found him anyway, in a way that could not be undone. That night, Kevin's son lost his father. A family lost their anchor. A community lost one of their own. And the world was forced to confront the stark reality of how fleeting life can be, how quickly it can all be taken away, and how violence leaves behind ripples of grief that no one can measure. In the hours after Kevin Watson was gunned down, the live stream became both a haunting memory and a vital piece of evidence. Investigators arrived on the scene, combing the area for shell casings, witnesses, and any thread that could unravel the mystery of who had taken his life. The Facebook Live recording circulated quickly, shared by shocked viewers who realized they had just watched a murder unfold before their eyes. For detectives, that footage became a starting point, a chilling but crucial lead. The investigation quickly revealed the brutality of the act. Kevin had been targeted in broad daylight, and the brazenness of the crime sent shivers through the community. This wasn't a killing done in the shadows. It was carried out as if those responsible didn't care who saw, even if it was the entire internet. Authorities knew they weren't just chasing a killer. They were racing against time to stop someone who felt untouchable. Police officers canvassed the neighborhood, speaking with residents and anyone who might have been near Kevin that day. While some offered fragments of information, others hesitated, fearful of retaliation. In communities plagued by gun violence, silence can sometimes feel like the only shield against becoming the next victim. This made the investigation even more complicated, leaving detectives to rely heavily on the digital evidence Kevin himself had unknowingly captured. The live stream was reviewed frame by frame, every sound scrutinized, every shadow analyzed. Forensic experts worked to match the gunfire's sound to weapons commonly found in Chicago's underground. Detectives compared what little could be seen in the video with street cameras and eyewitness testimony, piecing together a timeline that grew clearer with each passing day. Kevin's final broadcast became more than just a tragic moment. It was a silent witness. But justice in cases like this is never straightforward. Prosecutors must build their arguments carefully, ensuring every thread is supported by undeniable evidence. Too often, Cases tied to street violence can fall apart without cooperative witnesses or clear proof linking the accused of crime. In Kevin's case, investigators leaned on technology, surveillance footage, ballistic tests, and that haunting Facebook Live to strengthen their pursuit of accountability. As the case moved forward, it became a test of both the justice system and the community's will to demand answers. Every step toward identifying a suspect brought a mixture of relief and pain for Kevin's family. The closer they got to justice, the more they were reminded of the man they lost, the father whose smile would never again brighten their days. For Kevin's loved ones, the legal process was both a lifeline and a burden. Each court date was another wound reopened, each headline another reminder that his death was now public record. Still, they showed up determined to see this through. They wanted the world to know Kevin was more than a victim on a live stream. He was a man whose life mattered and whose story deserved justice. In many ways, Kevin's case highlighted the intersection between modern technology and traditional justice. His murder was not hidden. It was broadcast for all to see. And that live stream, as haunting as it was, ensured his story could not be ignored, forcing both investigators and the public to reckon with the violence that stole him away. In the days after Kevin's death, his family's grief was raw and unshakable. His mother spoke through tears, describing her son as a man who loved to laugh, who had dreams for a better life, and who never deserved such a cruel ending. For her, every memory of Kevin, from childhood birthdays to his proudest moments as a father, now felt like both a treasure and a weight, a reminder of everything that had been stolen from them. Kevin's children were left with questions far bigger than their young hearts could carry. Friends and relatives recalled how he adored them, how he lit up when they were around, and how he always talked about wanting to build something lasting for their future. Now, those dreams were left unfinished, and his absence created a silence that nothing could fill. Their lives were forever changed, not just by the loss of their father, but by the violent way it had happened. The community that knew Kevin was also shaken. Neighbors who had grown accustomed to the steady hum of city life found themselves replaying the gunshots in their minds. For them, Kevin's murder was not just one man's tragedy. It was another reminder the grip gun violence had on their streets. The fact that his death had been live-streamed only made it more surreal, forcing people to face the reality that safety felt like a distant luxury. Friends described Kevin as someone who always tried to bring light to the people around him. They shared stories of his humor, his resilience, and his constant ability to keep going despite hardships. For those who loved him, watching his final moments online felt like a cruel distortion of his story. They wanted him remembered not for the violence, but for the man he was, strong, caring, and hopeful, even in a world that so often felt heavy. Local activists stepped forward as well, using Kevin's case to highlight the broader issues at play. They organized vigils and rallies, urging the city to confront the cycles of poverty and violence that left so many vulnerable. At these gatherings, candles were lit, prayers were said, and Kevin's name was spoken with reverence. His death became both a personal tragedy and a rallying cry, sparking conversations about what could be done to prevent the next life from being cut short. Church leaders offered comfort, reminding the grieving community that while Kevin's life had ended, his story could live on to the strength of those who refused to forget him. They urged people to lean on one another, to share their pain rather than carry it alone. In sermons and gatherings, they reminded Kevin's family that grief shared is grief carried together. Perhaps the most powerful voices were those of his family, who spoke directly to the public. They wanted the world to know Kevin was not just another victim, not just a statistic in Chicago's ongoing struggle with violence. He was a son, a father, a friend. He had dreams, flaws, and laughter like anyone else. By speaking out, they fought against the silence that too often swallows victims of violence, refusing to let Kevin's story fade into the background. Together, the voices of family, friends, and community formed a chorus of remembrance. Their grief was deep, but so was their determination. They would not allow Kevin Watson's name to be reduced to a headline or a moment on social media. For them, his life carried meaning, and through their love and their voices, that meaning would endure. Kevin's murder was not an isolated act of violence. It was a chilling reminder of crisis that continues to touch families across Chicago and countless cities nationwide. The fact that his last moments were streamed on Facebook Live added a haunting layer. Technology intended to connect us had instead broadcast tragedy in real time. For many, it raised urgent questions about the world we live in, where violence is not just lived but also witnessed on screens. The live stream of Kevin's final moments forced viewers to grapple with something more than loss. It highlighted how desensitized society can become when tragedy unfolds before our eyes. Some people watched in shock, others in horror, and some even shared the video without regard for the dignity of Kevin or his grieving family. It was a reflection of how violence has seeped into the digital age, raising concerns about how compassion and respect can get lost in a culture of instant content. Beyond technology, Kevin's case shone a spotlight on the ongoing epidemic of gun violence. Every year, Chicago buries hundreds of victims, each with their own story, their own family left shattered. Kevin's death was one of many, but for those who knew him, it was everything. His case became a reminder that behind every statistic is a human being whose life carried weight, whose absence leaves a void that numbers can never capture. Communities often wrestle with the question of why violence continues to cycle. Poverty, limited opportunity, systemic inequities, and strained relationships with law enforcement all play roles. Kevin's murder became a mirror reflecting these larger struggles. His death, in broad daylight and on a public platform, forced people to confront not just who pulled the trigger, but the conditions that allowed such acts to feel so inevitable in the first place. For families like Kevin's, the social reflection is deeply personal. They do not see their loved one's murder as part of an epidemic or trend. They see it as their world shattering in an instant. Yet, they also recognize that their loss connects to a wider pattern, one that demands attention if future families are to be spared the same pain. At vigils and community discussions, Kevin's name was spoken alongside those of other victims, creating a tapestry of remembrance that stretched far beyond one individual. It wasn't just about one man's life, but about reclaiming the value of every life lost too soon. These gatherings became spaces of healing reflection and also demand for change, demand for safety, demand for dignity. In the end, Kevin's story became more than a tragedy. It became a reflection of the world we are all part of, a world where violence, technology, grief, and resilience intertwine. His life and death pushed people to ask hard questions. How do we protect our communities? How do we honor victims beyond their final moments? And how do we ensure that no other family has to feel the same pain that Kevin's family continues to carry? Kevin's death left a painful void, but also ignited a call for action. His family and friends, devastated by the sudden and brutal loss, urged the community not to let his story fade into another statistic. They reminded everyone that behind the headlines was a man whose life mattered, a brother, a friend, a son. Their plea was simple yet powerful. Let Kevin's story be a reason to fight harder for change. Across Chicago, community organizations and local leaders used Kevin's murder as a rallying cry. Vigils were not only moments of mourning, but also gatherings of resolve. People came together holding candles, their light cutting to the darkness as voices rose with promises to demand justice and push for safer streets. These moments became more than remembrance. They became declarations that lives like Kevin should never again be stolen so easily. The live stream of Kevin's final moments added urgency to the call for action. Many asked, how do we honor victims while protecting dignity in the digital age? Advocates called for responsible reporting, respectful sharing of sensitive content, and greater awareness of the impact on grieving families. For them, Kevin's last moment should serve as a reminder to treat victims with compassion, not as entertainment. On the ground, community support took many forms. Churches opened their doors for counseling sessions. Violence prevention groups stepped up efforts to provide mentorship and outreach to at-risk youth. Neighbors who might not have spoken before came together in solidarity, recognizing that change starts with unity. Kevin's story inspired both grief and resolve, planting seeds of connection where division once stood. But real change, as family and supporters stressed, cannot come from community alone. They called on city leaders, policymakers, and law enforcement to take meaningful steps. More investment in safe spaces, more resources for young people, more accountability for violence prevention. Kevin's murder underscored the urgent need for systemic action, not just temporary mourning. For those watching his story unfold from afar, the call was clear as well. Don't turn away. Whether through advocacy, supporting community programs, or simply checking in on neighbors, every small act contributes to building safer communities. Kevin's death was a reminder that violence does not exist in isolation. It ripples outward, touching everyone. The choice we all have is whether to respond with silence or with action. Ultimately, the call to action in Kevin's name is about transformation. It's about ensuring his memory is not defined solely by how his life ended, but by the movement sparked in its wake. Every candle lit, every voice raised, every effort made toward healing and prevention becomes part of his legacy. And in that, Kevin's story, though born of tragedy, has the power to inspire something greater, a collective commitment to protect life, to honor dignity, and to create change that lasts. As Kevin Watson's story comes to a close here, we are left with an ache, not only for the life that was lost, but for the world that allowed such violence to take root. His final moments, broadcast for the world to see, are a haunting reminder of how fragile life truly is. But beyond the shock of that live stream lies the truth of who Kevin was, a man with laughter to share, family to love, and dreams that were tragically cut short. We cannot let Kevin's story fade into another headline, another passing tragedy in a city that has seen too many. He was not just a victim of violence. He was a son, a brother, a loved one. He deserves to be remembered not for the way his life ended, but for the love and joy he brought into this world. When we share his story, we make sure his voice does not disappear into silence. At its core, Kevin's story asks us to reflect on the kind of communities we want to build. Do we settle for fear and violence as normal, or do we fight for a world where safety and dignity are rights, not privileges? The answer lies in the choices we make together. By telling his story, by speaking his name, we refuse to accept that such violence is inevitable. This is where you, the viewer, play a vital role. Sharing Kevin's story is not just about remembering one life. It's about joining a larger movement of awareness and change. Each time his story is told, it sparks conversations, fuels empathy, and calls for action. You can be part of that ripple effect simply by pressing share, by bringing his name into more homes, more hearts. If Kevin's story moved you today, let his memory live on through action, like this video. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and most importantly, share this story so more people can understand what is happening in communities like Kevin's. These simple acts of engagement ensure his life was not in vain. They keep the fight for justice alive. And if you want to continue exploring stories like Kevin's, heartbreaking, compelling, and deeply human, then subscribe to this channel. We are dedicated to telling the stories that must be heard, stories that speak of tragedy, but also of resilience and hope. Subscribing means you stand with us in keeping these voices alive. It's never easy to close a story like Kevin's. It weighs heavily on the heart because it reminds us of how much work is left to do. Yet, there is hope in the telling. Hope that by remembering him, by reflecting on his life and death, we are slowly creating a world where fewer families will know this kind of pain. So as we close tonight, let's not just grieve, let's reflect. Let's honor Kevin not only with our tears, but with our voices and our choices. Let's carry his story forward so that it fuels something greater than despair, a collective commitment to compassion, justice, and change. Kevin Watson's life mattered. His story matters. And by being here, watching, listening, and sharing, you become part of ensuring that his name, his struggle, and his legacy will never be forgotten. Thank you for watching. Please remember to share Kevin's story. Leave your thoughts below, and subscribe for more true crime stories that must be told. Together, let's shine a light on these tragedies, not to dwell in the darkness, but to build a brighter path forward.